You're listening to the Precision Shooting Podcast, discussing all aspects of precision and long-range rifle shooting. This episode is brought to you by Projectile Warehouse. Find your perfect projectile. And now, over to your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to the Precision Shooting Podcast. I'm Rusty and with me here is Andrew. How you going, Andrew?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Rusty.
Excellent. And over there is Greg. How you doing, Greg?
Yeah, good, thanks, Rusty.
Fantastic. So here we are. Now, we went shooting on the weekend, which we probably should talk about. We went out and had a bit of a play at one of the long-range properties we shoot on. Did you guys enjoy it?
Yeah, it was a really good day, I thought.
Yeah, certainly, and the actual range, and I'll let Sam describe it. It's unique in terms of other places we've been to, in terms of luxury.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Your shooting position is about 2 meters from the front door, and you can head straight in the front door into the aircon and grab yourself a coffee or tea or Coke or whatever, and sit down for a while, and then head back out there and have another shot. It's not too bad. Not too bad at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a shoot out to over a mile from the back door there.
Yeah, that was I didn't think that was going to happen, but it did. It was fantastic. So how far did you get out to, Greg?
Well, I actually wasn't really, doing, I guess, long-range shooting as like the other guys were doing. I was mainly just there to get my drops right for my 243 and my 223 for a shooting trip coming up. So I did shoot the 243 out to 748 for the 87 grain VMAXs. So I was pretty happy with that. Got some drops. And the 223, I think I went out just to 388. So that was just to basically calibrate my ballistic computer.
Yep.
So I achieved what I wanted to achieve. I didn't get my 308 out, but I think we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show in terms of I'm not very happy with that at the moment. So,
okay.
Yeah, but no, it was an excellent day and I achieved everything I wanted to achieve.
Fantastic. Did you enjoy it, Andrew?
Yeah.
You're a wind caller extraordinaire.
Yeah, well, we kind of needed to. What were we, about 15, 20 mile an hour winds in the end there? But no, it was good. It was good to see some of those guys, sort of put the what they've been learning into practice, and I think they all really got on. We had 65 metres, and I think all the guys got onto it. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it was good fun, and so just to clarify that for those listening, so it was a sort of a Southern Shooters Day out with a bunch of guys who would come out with training courses, and it was a chance for them just to stretch the legs and have a bit of fun and get to know each other better. So I had my 260 there, and that was doing really well out to about 1,000, but just couldn't quite get it there at the 1665. So that's a challenge for the next time, I guess. I wasn't overly comfortable, to be honest. I didn't take my bipod with me, and so I just wasn't able to load up the rest as I normally would with a bipod, and it's the gun may not be able to do it, but I just didn't. I want to have another crack at it. To be fair, I want to have another crack. So next time I'll take it with me again, give it a go, see how we go. But tell you what, the way it shoots at 1200, I'm pretty happy with it anyway. So no complaints.
Yep.
Yeah, and we'll put up on the on Facebook or on the webpage. Greg, you had a fancy camera with you.
Yes. I just bought a camera. I've been spending a bit of money lately.
Cashed up.
The wife doesn't know yet, so
she will now.
Hopefully she doesn't hear the show.
She's not going to listen to this.
I told her it was for family photos, but little does she know it's also got a 60 times optical zoom that just happens to suit long-range shooting and hunting videos.
Other people's families. You're going to be taking photos of other people's families.
Yeah, so I took that out, and we got out the night before, and we actually were looking at the craters on the moon with it at one point, so I was pretty impressed with that. And then, got some good footage of some nice shots at 500 metre target, but I made all sorts of amateur mistakes with a lot of the footage, like working in the digital zoom instead of staying in the optical zoom, so it was all granulated. That will kill it. Yeah. And the wind was vibrating. The tripod a lot. causing issues. So, I've got my training wheels on, but I'm expecting to get some really good footage that we can put up on the website for sure.
Yeah, the one I saw was out to 500, and you could see the bullet flying through and hit. And we'll get that one up there. That looked really good.
Yeah, that was full path too. You could basically see the back of the projectile full path, which especially on full screen high def.
Yep.
I was quite surprised by that one. It's good.
What caliber was that one?
That was 243.
That's 243.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Very good. Well, I don't know if you guys saw. I guess you have because I printed it out and put it in front of us. But I don't know if you'd seen it previously. Precision Rifle Blog, which is an excellent website if you're into the precision long range shooting. Yeah, they every year do a bit of a review of the PRS. Which is a precision rifle series in the US, and they survey the top 100 guys and get the equipment and the calibers and all the information that the guys have been using, and they've released the one about the cartridges that they've been running, and it's quite interesting to see, particularly because it documents some of the shift over the last few years. It's not necessarily. I was surprised personally. To give you a quick rundown for those listening who haven't seen it, but we will put a link in the show notes. The top four, Greg, if you want to read out the top four there for us.
Yep, the top four were 6.5 by 47 lap, 6mm Creedmoor, 6.5 mm Creedmoor, and 6 by 47 lap. So it's all in the 6.5 mm. Reigning supreme. We also notice in the stats, if you can bring them up, 308's pretty much dropped off completely.
I don't think there was even a mention of a 30 in this year.
Yeah, 2013, they had 2% of the competitors on 30 cals. Yeah,
top 50. There was only 2%, and the last 2 years they've had no 30 cals in the top 50.
What's more sort of, I guess, surprising is that there's only 6mm and 6.5mm in there. Yeah, there's no 7mm. There's nothing else in there.
Yeah, I would have thought 7mm would have been a contender, but I guess the type of shooting they do, the 6s and 6.5s achieve it ballistically, and then also it's really limit the recoil and a few other factors, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess when you target shooting and you don't need that energy at target, you could probably go for something a bit lighter and quicker.
That's right. You don't need to kill the target. You just need to hit it in these competitions. So
yeah.
No, I was really surprised to not see a 30 in there. I would have thought maybe something like a 300 Win Mag. But no, it's obviously, looking at there,
Yeah,
here's the top 100. We've got the top 100 up in front of us now.
So there's the 6 Creedmoor, or in the 6mm, there's the Creedmoor, the 47 Lapua, the Dasher, the Super LR, 6XC, and the 243 with one appearance. And the 6.5s, again, the Lapua, the Creedmoor, the 260 Rem, and 6.5 by 55 improved, which I thought was a little bit different.
Yeah, you will note there, though, Rusty, it is only one competitor, so it's obviously, I would presume, a very competent shooter who happens to just like the round. But I think you'd probably find that if you look at the ballistics of all those cartridges, they'd be pretty similar.
Yeah.
Similar size and weight projectiles going similar speeds, I would think.
Yeah, I guess if in that type of thing, it's ballistically ballistics. External ballistics is more important than your terminal ballistics, as Greg mentioned. And so, you go with something fairly light, fairly easy to shoot, and something that actually feeds out of a magazine, which would be important.
Incredibly high BC.
So, Greg, you this actually got you thinking, didn't it, this article?
Yeah, it did. I've got a Remy 700 SPS varmint with a factory barrel on it, and I enjoy shooting it. It's a good platform, and I've put a fair bit of effort into it. But and I probably haven't got the results I was looking for from it. And just reading these articles, I've tried a lot of projectiles. Probably the biggest problem I've got with it is there's this monstrous jump to the lands that I'm struggling to get consistency out of the rifle. But this article has sort of prompted me to go, well, if I'm going to take the barrel off and do anything to it, why don't I look at putting a new barrel on it and go to a match barrel rather than the factory barrel? And then secondary to that, I'm going, well, what's a good process to go through to understand, well, what is the projectile? And certainly talking to Andrew on the weekend, he's saying, quite often you should try to identify the projectile that suits your need and then order the barrel to suit that projectile. And that made a lot of sense to me. So I guess I'm just going to start on the journey, if you like, of doing some analysis around some of these projectiles, making a barrel choice, and actually order the correct barrel, and go just through the whole process and do some testing at the end, and hopefully end up with a rifle that suits my needs in terms of basically just shooting gongs out at sort of 1K to 1.2 Ks is all sort of what I'm looking at the moment. So
I guess that's the important part, isn't it, to really establish what you're wanting to achieve, and then working back from there. So if your aim is to be shooting, just over 1,000, just a bit beyond,
and that's it. Knowing what you want to do is important to work out how you want to measure what is a good projectile and what is not a good projectile for what you want to do. So I'd probably say I'm looking at trying to be consistent at a K, and maybe push out as far as 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just as things progress. But at the moment, I'm targeting 1K gun.
And what about shy of that? Because knowing you're probably not just going to sit there at 1,000 all day long.
No.
You've got an application in between there as well?
Well, obviously, being a new Calibre, I'd work my way out to there. But I think you have to pick that optimum or ideal scenario that you want to try to achieve. Otherwise, you may select the incorrect projectile. I think if I choose a distance at 600, I'm going to get very different results, which we'll talk about later, how we might do that analysis. I might get very different projectile choice for an ideal fit than I would at 1,000. So I'll probably want to pick the 1,000, drop back and just work my way through to 1,000.
I mean, I don't know whether you guys have seen it, but one of Todd Hodnett's videos, the Accuracy First guys, he talks about basically you pick the projectile and you pick it on what you want it to do. It's obviously got to get there as quickly as it can with at least wind resistance. And if you're hunting, it's got to perform terminally. But if you're not hunting, you don't have that consideration. But he said you pick the projectile and then you work your way from there, and you pick the cartridge that's going to do that.
Yep.
And then you basically build up from there. You build the rifle from there, rather than going, I'm going to build a rifle in whatever caliber, and then I'm going to work out what I'm going to do from there. It's more about you starting with what's actually flying through the air, and then you work back from there.
Well, I guess if you look at it that way, you're starting with whatever target you're hitting. So what are you going to hit it with? And then you take that back, and how do you deliver that to the target and go from there, including your scope as well. I guess you got to buy your scope to be able to set up to do that. We had one guy on the weekend who had a gun that would take it out to a mile, but he ran out of elevation. He almost ran out of magnification. Well, he ran out of reticle hold if he didn't back his magnification off.
Yeah, definitely scopes is one of those bigger limiting factors that can slow you down. You can have a great rifle and a great barrel, but if you don't, like you say, if you don't have the adjustment, you're just not going to get out there.
Well, we've seen several times, Sam, on the courses, the guys rock up with their whatever the scope might be, including high end stuff, and they find that once they step out to sometimes even 700-800 yards,
it fails them.
They can't adjust anymore, and so it becomes really a matter of kind of guessing where they're going to have to hold rather than precisely dialing, and
it makes it harder. Yes,
it's a critical point.
Particularly
Part of the.
I know there was a couple of guys on the weekend they had their turret fully wound out, and they were doing magnification holdover. So they started with 20 times, still not enough. I went down to 10 times to double up their reticule. Yeah, so they were really reaching out.
But anyway, I've managed to get us off topic pretty easily there. So back, I guess we're talking about the process you're going through to decide on what you're going to end up with, and scopes are a part of that. But that you've got to work out prior to that. We think what cartridge you're going to be running, and as part of that, we're talking about whether or not you choose your projectile first.
Yeah. So probably I've been doing a bit of reading, and there's a good book out there that if people don't know about it, it's a Brian Litt's book, Applied Ballistics for Long Range Shooting, and there's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet, and certainly for me, buying a decent book and getting in there has certainly cleared up a lot of things in my mind. But anyway, I was reading that book, and he was talking about dead space as a way to measure one calibre against another, or one projectile against another.
So what is dead space?
Dead space, and sorry, this is my words, not his. I'd wish I had his words. But it's basically, let's say you've got a 6-inch target at a K. Dead space is basically the distance that the projectile travels from the time it reaches the top of that target in height through the middle of it at 1,000, and then drops to 3 inches below past the target, and that whole distance is called dead space. And obviously, the longer that distance is, the less sensitive that calibre is to variations such as incorrect ranging. You always get inconsistent muzzle velocity. You strive to reduce it, but you always get it. So therefore, you're not as sensitive to that. And other variables that are sort of out of your control. And I don't know whether you guys want to mention a few more, but certainly the larger the dead space for that range, for that calibre, the more suited it is
basically
to that task.
It reduces, well, it gives you more margin for error, effectively.
Exactly.
I guess that's what we're always trying to achieve, isn't it? That's why you try and go for a higher BC bullet. You're trying to reduce your margin for error.
Yeah, exactly.
With the dead space comparison you're talking about, Greg, that's probably better once you've chosen a couple of contenders. Is that?
Yeah. So what you'd need, or what I need to collect together, is some real world load data, basically, in terms of the projectile used, the ballistic coefficient, preferably a G7 if I can get it, its muzzle velocity.
Yep.
With those things, I can calculate that for my gun, if it was fired out of my gun at that muzzle velocity.
So back to, I guess, calibre first. What are you edging towards for your purpose?
Yeah, so what took my attention the most is basically based on that precision rifle blog that we talked about earlier in terms of the Creedmoors, the 6 and 6.5s. Yep. I thought, well, if this is the favoured projectile, I'll go for that. And I was about to just jump, like, without any sort of analysis or anything.
As we've all done plenty of times.
I'll stand back on this one and just sort of start doing some numbers and some comparisons and measure these calibers or projectile performances in a meaningful way against each other. So that's what I'm going to do first, and I'll go by what the results give. Mm-hmm. So obviously I'm restricted to a short action rifle
because
it's 308. Yep. So I've got to stick in that short action span.
What about feeding? Because that's going to be another clarification.
Yeah, well, currently it's internal mag. It is quite short.
Yep.
However, the current barrel has a very large jump to the land. So hopefully when I rebarrel this thing, I can sort of get that down. And I don't know whether, Andrew, you got any comments on that, whether typically you can get that, is it headspace, correct, to help with...
No, it's not so much headspace, Greg, but it's more, I think particularly these cartridges that were, the ones that were being used, sort of almost exclusively at the top end of the competitive shooting, they have to use magazines. So everything's magazine fed, and they need that ability to shoot rapidly. So with that as a fairly critical consideration, they need to have a cartridge that will fit in the mag and be able to use a ballistically efficient projectile. And if you go with something that's the length of a 308 or a 260 or whatever, 243 length sort of cartridge, it really limits that room you've got in the magazine. So you then either have to seat your projectiles really deeply in the case, or you have projectiles that aren't very long. So I think, they've chosen a shorter cartridge. So the shorter cartridges are often more efficient in the way they burn the powder as well. But what they'd also be doing is they're matching the throat on their rifle and their barrel to the projectile they're using. So they go, I've got 2.8 inches or whatever it might be to seat a maximum length of the magazine. So they'll base whatever projectile they want to use, they'll seat it to that length and then work out how long they need to cut the throat in that barrel to achieve that. They're not, a factory barrel, almost exclusively factory rifles suffer from that long throat, short magazine syndrome.
Absolutely.
And that's where, if you're going down the path you're looking at doing that, you custom tailor it to what you want to do, which is really not available in a factory gun.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big consideration because, excuse me, I'd like to do more competitions. So probably mag feeding is definitely what I need to change to. But yeah, certainly I've got to start that process of identifying that projectile. I think that's probably critical, and that's something I probably need to do before the next show. Is get together some load data, do those dead space calculations, and I might do those calculations based on a lot of different distances, just so our listeners can have a look at that. And if that they mightn't be reaching for a K, they might be reaching for 600 or 800. They can get some meaningful information out of it based on real calibers and make an informed decision. So yeah, I think that's probably the next step.
Are you looking down the 6 mil, 6.5 mark, or you're going to really leave it up to the data, or where are you sitting with that?
The 6 and the 6.5 has got my attention. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
However, I'm quite happy to bow to the analysis.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I think the reason that the 6 and the 6.5s are as popular as they are for these competitive shooting is they're not concerned about energy. They're not concerned about projectile design as far as terminal performance. So if all you're trying to do is maximise your possibility of hitting the target, then that's probably the best for that particular set of circumstances. I mean, if you were looking at long range shooting on, say, a deer, a large deer, or an animal that needed projectile size, then it opens up a whole another kettle of worms.
And I think that's probably a key point for the listeners is this is the target shooting application.
Sure.
Yep.
So as soon as we go to a hunting projectile and we're looking for either rapid expansion or controlled expansion, usually BC suffers.
Yes.
So they wouldn't stand up well in this scenario, but you could still do the same process.
Absolutely.
You just have to pick the projectiles that fit your, what would you call it?
Application.
The application that you're assessing. So you'd look at all the hunting rounds or solids and, ballistic tips, whatever suits you need, and do exactly the same thing. So that's probably one thing too, is that hopefully at the end of this, the readers have a process in which they can make an informed decision too, whether it's hunting or target
Well, I guess that comes down to, that's one of the very first considerations would be what you want the bullet to do, and that's everything based from there. So
that is the first part, isn't it?
You've established what you want what you want this rifle to do, Greg. So it's a matter of that's sort of taken care of to start with. So.
Yep.
And I think that's right, Andrew. I often deal with guys who are looking to buy their next gun and that sort of thing, and I guess too often guys are trying to get one gun that will solve everything and be used for all things, which I understand from a financial point of view or from a time point of view that makes sense. So there's no problem there. But I guess the guys probably listening to this and those in the room, we're not looking for one gun to resolve everything. We're looking for one gun for a particular purpose, and the more I've found anyway for me, that the more specific you can be with that purpose, the better your firearm will be for that role. And if you're in the position where you can have multiple guns and can afford such a thing, that's excellent because you get really tailored stuff. There is some crossover, certainly, but the more specific you can be about your number one goal, really.
I think the less
beneficial.
less compromise you make, the better you're going to be. Like these guys, these top 100 shooters in the US competition, they're not compromising at all. They're setting about to give themselves the most chance of winning.
Yeah, and I guess they've got fairly known competitions, fairly known challenges they're going to face, and while the individual stages themselves may be very unknown and very much surprising when they arrive to it, they've got a fair indication of what they're going to achieve or what they're needing to achieve. Yeah, but it was good to see. Very good. So what's your next step then, Greg? You're going to...
Certainly my intent for the next show is to collect a number of projectiles that will fit in that will go in a case that will fit in a short action Remy, and do dead space analysis on those projectiles. And like I said, I'll put that across lots of distances, not just the K, just to see how it performs as they get further out, and if any take over or are superseded by other projectiles. But I think hopefully it'll be interesting results, and certainly the intent is to bring it into the next show, and we'll talk about those results, and we'll get it up on the website for the listeners to look and make their own decisions. But again, like I said, it'll be restricted to Remy short action, and the projectiles will be restricted to target projectiles. I just say take away the process of doing it, and I'll write all that down so people can run through it themselves.
Yeah, I guess what I think will be interesting in this sort of investigation as well will be also, the wind, because I mean you might find that certain projectile diameters and weights will shoot maybe flatter as far as trajectory, but they might lack in the wind a little bit. So it'd be interesting to see where the crossover points are between, say, the 6mm and the 6.5.
I've got to say, I haven't considered the wind drift side.
Yep.
So what I might do, I'll start with dead space.
Yep.
And we'll see what the standouts are. Maybe we can rank. That'll just be on drops.
Sure. Yeah.
And then maybe we can reduce it down, or just do another overlay for drift. We'll just have to. I'm not quite sure how I would do that, but it'd have to be all calculator based, I guess, on
It would be, yeah.
10 mile an hour wind or something. I don't know.
Yep.
But certainly
that side of things pretty linear. So you go with 10 and that will give you an indication of everything else.
Well, it doesn't really matter the wind speed you use. It's if you just run the same for all, it doesn't really matter what. Yeah.
I have heard on a podcast that if you've got a pretty strong 3 o'clock wind, that you sometimes get what's called atmospheric jump. You get a small elevation jump from a strong right hand wind. Have you guys heard about that one?
Is that a referring to a crosswind jump?
Yeah, crosswind. So they used to model it in ballistic calculators. So I'm just thinking, we'll you don't see it in ballistic calculators anymore.
It's built in.
It's built in.
Yeah,
so I'm just thinking.
Anyway, with applied ballistics, which is what I use,
yeah,
it is built in there.
Yeah. Well, I guess as long as I use the same one, it's going to be consistent, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as long as you keep all the parameters the same and just change the actual projectile and the velocity that it's going, you keep everything else the same. It'll be interesting to see, because I think personally, like I'd prefer a projectile that was better in the wind than, say, on elevation.
Yeah.
Because its wind is the one that's the hardest to control. So I mean, I would probably prefer personally a projectile that wasn't as flat shooting. You run some figures, say, for a 308, for example, you might run a big heavy bullet like one of the guys on the weekend was shooting the 215 grain Berger, and that thing's not going to be shooting flat, but it'll certainly have a lot less wind drift than something lighter and faster. So
it's a good point, and in terms of drops, there's a lot of elements of drops that are measurable, right, whereas wind is very difficult to measure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you're right. So no, we'll certainly do that wind overlay, and yeah, well, absolutely. And then I guess it's just to weigh up the benefits.
Yeah, the option that compromises the least.
Yep.
And sounds cool as well. You have to have a good sounding. The name of the projectile, or the name of the round has to sound pretty good. Yeah.
We could set about designing a new one, maybe.
Yeah, that's it. Don't agree? All right, fair enough. Now we've got a question from Troy that has come in. So I thought I'd throw it to you guys. Okay, hang on. Let me turn around and look at it. He wants to know. Sorry, I got the name wrong. Sorry, Toby. It's Toby, not Troy. Anyway, Toby wants to know, he heard that it's more accurate to shoot from a bag than it is from a bipod. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the technique you're using, Rusty. I've seen really accurate shooting from both, and I think like shooting technique is, there's multiple different ways to achieve the result, and I think it's like one of those things that it's consistency is key. I've seen guys shoot off bags inconsistently and get hopeless results. To me, for field kind of shooting, a bipod is certainly the most convenient, but also if you're consistent in your technique, if you're loading your bipod up and that sort of thing, I wouldn't say that shooting on a bag has any technical advantage personally.
Yeah, personally, I find the bipod, because I've done so much shooting behind a bipod now, that I find that better to shoot from, particularly with bigger calibers. I certainly find that it's easier for me to control the recoil and be more comfortable. But perhaps it's even just a mental thing. I'm more comfortable myself, more confident behind a bipod than I am a rest or a front bag.
Yeah, I'm much the same. I just feel I can get a more stable position behind a bipod. Probably is because I haven't done much bag shooting, but I have found the cheaper bipods tend to bounce a bit more. Can be quite unstable.
Well, they're not nearly as solid, and I think the sort of absolute necessity for a field shooting bipod is some adjustment in it, some pan and some tilt.
Yeah, absolutely. I have always used the Harris bipods up until a little while ago. I've got myself an Atlas. I'm not sold that they're far better than a Harris. I comfortably shoot off a Harris bipod as well. I haven't rushed out and sold on my Harris to buy Atlas ones, but I'm not at all unhappy with the Atlas. I do like the fact it's very easy to change the feed on them, but that's an aside. But I mentioned before that I had that issue on the weekend where I just couldn't get comfortable on the bag. It was a front rest, so a small bag on the front rest, and leaning into it and trying to load it up, I couldn't do. The gun would just slip off. And then same with the recoil, you'd slip too far back. And perhaps it's a combination of not being overly comfortable with it. And yeah, I
think it's one of those things. You look at the sort of the disciplines that use bags are often very heavy rifles.
Yeah, true.
Or, in the case of a lot of the 1,000-yard sort of competitive rifles that's sort of really popular in the States, it's taking off here too, but they're really heavy guns. And so they don't have to control the gun at all. Yeah. It's sitting on a front rest and a rear bag. They pretty much, it just rides. They don't have to manhandle the rifle at all.
Yep.
And bench rest shooting, it's they're heavy guns. They're not overly huge, but they're very calibers. Small calibers, light projectiles. They're really not having to deal with recoil in any significant way.
Sure.
If you try and put say a 300 Win Mag in a 10-pound rifle on a bag, it's going to jump everywhere.
You know about it, certainly.
Yeah, a lot easier to control on a bipod, but again, I don't think one is necessarily better than the other.
No, I'd agree, Andrew, and I think even you could have the best bag in the world. Also, you could have the best. We've been saying we probably personally all prefer bipod, so we could have the best bag in the world, and we probably prefer to shoot on that than a really rubbishy, crappy bipod, and vice versa. It's probably about the quality of the equipment.
And it comes down to the application. I mean, a lot of the shooting that we do is it's not from a formalised range with one firing point. It could be anywhere. It could be if you're in a hunting situation, you have to make the decision quickly, and you haven't got time to set up all the gear. So that kind of dictates what we use.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Well, thank you for that, Toby. And I reckon that's about it for this episode. So thanks for coming in, guys. And
No worries.
Be interested to see what you come up with, Greg.
absolutely.
So will I. Yeah,
Well,
no, it'll be good. And certainly that'll we'll build on that next show for sure.
Yep, and we'll we'll keep that posted on Facebook and also on the website with the information that Greg comes up with. And hopefully we have Dan back next episode.
Yep.
And we'll be able to. Don't know what's on the cards for next episode, but it sounds good already.
I think we've got a lot of avenues of investigation here, Rusty,
with Greg's side of things.
Yeah, and that will branch off into a lot of different areas. I think subtopics that can be discussed for an hour at a time by themselves.
There's so many variables, isn't there? There's so many different elements to consider.
It's all good fun. Well, guys, thanks very much for listening, and we'll tune in next time, and we'll keep on chatting guns.
Thanks for listening to the Precision Shooting Podcast. To continue the discussion, check out our Facebook page. And for more information, head to our website, www.precisionshootingpodcast.com.au. This episode was brought to you by Projectile Warehouse. Find your perfect projectile.